Chair.
I call to order January 16th Building and Lands Committee meeting. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please let the record show that all members of the committee are present. Councilman Avens, Councilwoman Swank, Chairman Winkle, other council members present, Councilman DeVries, Councilman Schaefer, Councilman Jacobs from administration. We have Mayor Corcoran, Economic Development Director Lieber, and we also have Council Clerk Gollum here. You had before you the Building and Lands meeting minutes, October 16th, 2023. Is there any corrections or comments to those minutes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved as they're approved. So today we're here to discuss 2024-13, an ordinance amending Chapter 1480 and Chapter 660 and repealing Chapter 1476 and Chapter 650 of the North Ridgeville Codified Ordinances to make improvements and clarifications to requirements for property maintenance. I'd like to start this meeting by passing it over to Economic Development Director Lieber for a summary, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council might recall during my budget hearing, one of my goals for 2024 was to maybe refresh and reinvigorate our property maintenance program. And there's really a four-prong approach to that. The first one is updating our codes and ordinances that need updating. The second is to develop some internal procedures, policies, and templates for use by staff. The third is to hire and train staff. And the fourth is really to provide community education about what our requirements are and try to encourage compliance through education versus citation. So the first one is really what I'm here to talk about tonight, which is the updating of the codes. So when we reorganized last year and I became supervisor over building and engineering, one of the first things I did was start a discovery process with the building department about the property maintenance program. What was going well, what wasn't, what areas of the code needed clarification, what were the problem areas we needed to cover. So I convened meetings with our chief building official, and then that expanded eventually to include our police and fire chief, mayor, and our law department. So we've had numerous meetings internally over this since probably about May of last year, and it finally got pulled together at the end of 2023 to bring to council in the form of this piece of legislation. While not potentially perfect and doesn't maybe resolve all the conflicts in our code, I think gets us a lot further than where we are today. So just some of the issues I've been trying to correct or observations I had that caused this legislation journey to begin. So, Chapter 1476 is one of the two I'm proposing to repeal. That chapter was adopted in 1966, so it's one of the originals that was adopted, governing unsafe buildings in the city. So it really specifically dealt with unsafe buildings and didn't go much farther beyond that. But then in 2004 came along Chapter 1480. So that was an ordinance that was based upon my understanding the International Property Maintenance Code, and it was an effort to be a broader look at both exterior, interior property maintenance and unsafe buildings. So, we now had a whole section of 1480 on unsafe structures, but we had a whole chapter 1476 on unsafe structures, and they weren't the same, and they had slightly different procedures. And no one did the work back in 2004 of identifying the fact that this new code was going to potentially conflict with something that we already had on the books. So over time, it's just the two continue to exist kind of parallel to each other. And I think creates a very confusing situation if you're the staff person or the person getting a violation notice. What in fact is the requirements you're supposed to be facing. The other thing of 1480, really there's a whole sections of provisions dealing with lighting, ventilation, occupancy, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and other standards that are already addressed by the Residential Code of Ohio and other state codes that we've adopted by reference. So, we don't really need to restate those things. So in speaking with the building official, he felt comfortable that if we struck out those particular sections, again, we've adopted Ohio building codes, not an international code. So we thought we really want to keep 1480 to an exterior property maintenance chapter And all the interior stuff can be governed by the Residential Code of Ohio and other applicable codes. Again, avoiding confusion both for staff and for those bound to follow that code. So similarly, in speaking with staff about kind of some of the frequent issues that might come up with property maintenance, I started hearing that there were some chapters in Part 6 that we needed to take a look at. Chapter 650 is about public nuisances. That's another one I'm proposing to repeal. That was adopted originally in 1974, and it's been amended since then, but it really deals with a specific subset of property maintenance conditions dealing with health and sanitation, so rubbish, garbage, other conditions that could create safety hazards. And that chapter did grant the city the ability to abate and to cause improvement, but again, there are other chapters already addressing that particular issue, and it would sometimes have different standards of what the city had to do in order to get to that point of abatement. And also in 1974, Chapter 660, which is Safety, Sanitation, and Health, was adopted, also since amended, and it dealt with other health and safety hazards. So it seemed kind of strange that you have these two chapters that kind of dealt with the same subject, but in different manners. What 660 did, though, was to kind of cut and paste a lot of relative sections from the Ohio Revised Code, where everything from securing abandoned refrigerators to, standards for removing snow and ice on sidewalks. Many of these are taken directly from the ORC. And speaking with the police chief, he didn't feel that we need to just reiterate and repeat the ORC in our local code. The police can cite under the ORC. We don't have to locally separately adopt those standards. And I guess my greater concern was that if the ORC should ever be amended, then is anyone paying attention in North Ridgeville to know that our code here needs to be also amended? Or are we having some still regulation or requirement reflected in our code? So, and one kind of example of how things get added over time, like in 660, there were two different standards, 0.04 and 0.05, both talk about snow and ice removal on sidewalks, and they give two different standards. So which one do you follow? The 4 hours after sunrise or the 12 hours after a storm event? So, just kind of identifying these problems that we really just needed to tackle, and now is a good time to do it. So, as a broad overview of the code changes, it's to, maintain those two code chapters, 1480 and 660, and put the things in those chapters that should be there. Deleting out redundant and conflicting code language, moving all the related requirements into one chapter where feasible. We're also going to be, in this process, standardizing our notice requirements and our appeals process. So, again, it's not one way in one chapter, another way in a different chapter. I've tried and attempted to create more specific standards when needed to reduce subjectivity. Sometimes the language seemed a little too fuzzy. And so if you receive a complaint or you're on an inspection, it's like, well, is this well-maintained? Well, what is well-maintained when it comes to pavement, or if it comes to, one thing I thought was maybe excessive was we don't consider high grass a violation until it exceeds 12 inches. And all of you who have a lawn know how challenging it is to cut even at 12 inches. Now imagine that's when we can cite someone, and then, now we have to wait for them. They have so many days to get back, and then if they don't, then the city can abate, but then we got to reach out to our contractor to go cut. I mean, you might as well use like a sickle at some point. It's getting well past the point. So we need to have a standard that's not onerous on our property owners, but that's reasonable so we can achieve, our property maintenance goals. So we did reduce that to 8 inches. And then, rather than in the codified ordinances, we're going to create compliance deadlines through policy. So, certain things will be an immediate violation, something you should be able to correct in 48 hours. Grass is one of them, or putting in your garbage cans. We don't need to specify that in the ordinances. We could have policies that outline what our compliance periods will be. And then, of course, I think it's appropriate to have an extension process when people have hardship or where they're working with us to get to a resolution and we see the effort. Maybe there's a couple things that are costly that, if they can work with us towards a solution, we're going to give a little more patience. So those are things that'll come along in the policy part, but this will be the backbone of the property maintenance program. So once these changes are adopted, we've drafted a policy guide for staff we'll be reviewing and then implementing. A zoning inspector is on tap to be hired this year, and that person will be tasked with this big job of helping us launch this more proactive, less reactive property maintenance program in the city. If you have any specific questions about any code section, let me know, but that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Do any other members of the committee have any questions?
I have a question for the chair. So if you walk into somebody's home and it's in need of dire repair and it's an elderly person, would you recommend to them, do we have a CHIP grant, apply for this?
So in part, we won't normally be walking into people's houses. So our property maintenance program is really going to focus on exterior property maintenance. The only time we might be getting on the inside is if we have reasonable suspicion that there's some very unsafe condition inside someone's home that is posing a hazard that could be jeopardizing someone's life, in which case we would ask for permission to enter, or if not, we could get an administrative search warrant through court to go inside. But generally we're looking on the exterior. But to your point, let's say it's something on the exterior. One of the community education pieces is also to talk about what resources are available to property owners. Maybe also some landlord-tenant information about what their rights are as tenants and what the responsibilities are as landlords. So really trying to help people understand what they're responsible for, how to achieve that. Some communities might go as far as like co-hosting even like a DIY homeowner workshop or something like that for certain types of repairs. So, we are participating in the CHIP program this year. That was recently announced, so that'll certainly be something in our arsenal too. We can, especially for those low-income people.
Perfect.
Mr. Abrams, you have anything?
One of the issues that I've heard from the building department of members is our notification process, and I believe that's dictated by the state of Ohio, where a registered letter has to go out.
That is locally determined. So
Is it? Okay.
we will be sending, we have a variety of methods of delivery. So, regular mail, personal service, post on the property, certified or registered, those are all options that we can use. Again, by policy, if you're telling someone that they need to tear down their house, do I think sending them just regular mail, one and done, and now no. I mean, we're going to make sure that anytime a significant investment's required, that might be the time we're like, okay, we're going to send certified before we take any next steps. And of course, also, the building department's not the end of the road. The next thing is to forward it to the law department and to site. So I've already talked to the law director about maybe getting law a little bit more involved before a citation is issued to try and help us work out some of these issues. Like the thing that I just don't want is being ignored. Like work with us, we'll work with you, but if you just ignore 3 letters, you're going to move along in the legal process to the next step. But sometimes when people get a letter from an attorney, all of a sudden they're more cooperative and responsive. So, we're going to make sure we follow our local notice requirements, and we're going to go a little out of our way to over-communicate with people, as we know we're going to be sending out more of these letters this year once it's
Yeah,
program
because
starts.
the complaint that I heard is you don't have to accept the certified letter,
Right.
so it sits at the post office, and
So
they
we
still
can
have.
also post on the property, so,
Yeah,
right
that's
on the-
that's fine. That's good news, quite
Yes.
frankly.
yes.
I do have a question. Is the spirit in 660 and 1480 to try to adjust when the Ohio Revised Code does as well, to incorporate any changes the Ohio Revised Code?
The idea was
Incorporates-
if we just delete those sections, then we never have to worry about being out of step, but they still apply. So the police, can still cite under those sections, under the Ohio Revised Code. We just we don't have to repeat, just like we don't have to cut and paste the Ohio building code and our building code. We just, it's always available to our police if they see a violation occurring.
Yeah, I see references in 1482, the Ohio Revised Code, which I would assume would incorporate any changes, I guess.
Yes,
That's
we'll
how
have to make
the
sure our
mechanics work.
cross-references are all updated as well.
And only comments I would have beyond that is earlier you said something about grass. There's a lot of parts of the city that just cannot mow until it's over 12 to 13 inches long because of how wet we are. So that would be something your policy manager, like, I don't know how you would have to consider that because it's not all the city, but a lot of the city, a lot of part of my city. So something to consider. And then lastly, we have a fair housing board, and something you mentioned earlier, interactions with the people of the city. That might be something that could help make that board a little more relevant or ability to help the city. So that's my comments. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Any other council members here have anything to add?
Yeah, another statement too, I've been reading, and Cleveland Heights is a great example. They're already starting to deal with those folks who are getting rid of grass and putting in natural landscaping, which means higher plants and that type of thing. Is that something that we're looking into and accommodating and trying to not let them use high grass as a natural turf?
Right, and I'll have to find the exact language and get back to you, but we do talk about, like cultivated lawns and like weeds, but we're not talking about planting beds, flower beds, or, ornamental things. So, that, in some cases, one person's ornamental bed is another person's like native grasses, right? So I'm sure we'll be encountering that and need to discern in our policy what is.
Yeah, because I know Metro Parks has, I'm sorry, I forgot where it is, but Metro Parks has planted a whole field of, I guess it's called prairie grass. And that stuff is like 3 feet high, and they're quite proud of it. And I'm gonna assume that somebody within the city is gonna catch on to things like that and try that in their front yard, and I'm not sure that we can stop them.
Well, in some cases, you see folks that do have the tall ornamental grasses, but again, like we're not just concerned about the appearance, we're concerned about the health and safety aspects. So is it a rodent issue? Is it blocking traffic, or people can't see coming down the sidewalk because cars are pulling out of the driveway? So there's other mechanisms we can use to make sure things don't grow wildly out of control too, from visibility and pedestrian and vehicle safety too.
Yeah. And again, in my view, it's important to have the strong codes. Again, prime example is Cleveland Heights. They have very strong codes. East Cleveland did not. There's the difference. I don't think we have to go any further.
Right. Well, and to Councilman Aben's point, that didn't happen overnight in Cleveland Heights, and it's not going to happen overnight here. We're going to have to be kind of selective about how we start rolling out the program if we have limited staff. So in my mind, it's always worst first. Like, pick the worst 5% you see in the city, or the chronic offenders, and let's start chipping away. We're not, going down we don't have the capacity to go down every street and pick on homeowners about little things. That's not the intent at all. It's really to tackle those things that you drive by and you're like, ooh, this does not reflect well on our city.
I can give you
This is a
2
big problem.
addresses already.
Sure.
Is there any other council members have any comments or questions? Mr. Jacobs?
Through the chair. Just for clarification, chapter 660, in looking at the current version compared to the new version, just simply looking at the table of contents, there are a number of sections that don't appear in the new chapter, such as noxious odors, abandoned refrigerators, and other things. But is it fair to say then that those items are addressed elsewhere, either under the Ohio Revised Code or elsewhere in our ordinances, and we're not ignoring these things and easing up?
Correct. Most everything that was eliminated, the sections that were eliminated were ORC duplicates.
Gotcha, okay. And then one other question, I noticed there's a section in 660 pertaining to the unauthorized use of South Central Park.
Yes.
Is there any reason why South Central Park Lake is pointed, like, we're singling that one out? There's other bodies of water, I'm assuming, on city property, retention basins and things that we wouldn't want people swimming in or
I know
fishing in.
I would agree there's probably other locations. I know our chief was eager to leave that specifically in there, as it's been an attractive nuisance in the past where folks have there have been serious incidents in that specific body of water, so I think it was just putting a fine point on the fact that it's not to be permitted there.
Okay.
Sort of like a warning on a lawnmower that says, don't stick your hand under the blades as they're spinning. Don't go in South Central Park Pond. Sometimes you have to just say it.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer, you have something to say?
Yes, I agree with you. I would think I reconsider the 8 inches, because sometimes it's just rains so much you can't possibly get it mowed in that time. I would also question what would you consider a hardship that would prevent you from mowing your yard?
Weather is certainly one. And again, we don't have the grass police exactly. I imagine grass is still gonna be somewhat on a complaint basis. And then those properties that we know are problematic and chronic offenders. But yeah, weather is key to, like, it's not really a financial issue of being able to mow your lawn. There might be construction happening on a property or some other unique thing. Those are the kinds of things we'll have to address on a case-by-case basis. But again, if the property owner is acknowledging an issue and is presenting us a timeline for compliance, we'd rather have compliance than spend all the staff time to get it towards a citation. Usually by the time you get through that process, the problem will be resolved anyway. So we're just looking for people to interact with us.
Any other council members? Okay, is there anybody in the audience who wants to comment on the issue of nuisances in the city? Seeing,
Councilmen don't count.
and we don't count. All right, seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move to approve?
Second, we need a motion to send it up to council.
Yeah, so it's moved by Abens to approve this and send back to council for consideration. Seconded by Swank. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Yes. None opposed. So this is going to be sent back to council for further consideration. Seeing